I suppose, what do we know about this place? Well, there's been a lot of effort into creating this beautiful garden that we sit and stand here today. I'm reminded of a story that Sharon told me about how this used to be a smoking ceremony garden that probably wasn't as picturesque as it is here today. And there's many, many stories to this garden. The rocks that you see over there that are in a circle, they're actually rocks from individual parts of the Sunshine Coast, Karoi, Glasshouse Mountains, all around to represent a unified approach here today with all the traditional custodians in the mob here. In this place we meet. The talking sticks over there, they've got some beautiful artwork on them, which is, was proudly drawn by the young Murrays in Nambour School. And there's some more of their beautiful paintings throughout the hospital here. Before we get too far into it, I would also got a couple of acknowledgements here. One is to acknowledge the hard work, the dedication, the commitment for the Chief Executive of the Sunshine Coast Hospital, the Adjunct Professor Naomi Dwyer, her continued commitment and support here to bring Sunshine Coast communities together. Thank you very much, Naomi. Put your hand together. Another very special thanks to Senator Claire Moore, who is the patroness of the Sunshine Coast Reconciliation Group, and her dedication and her commitment towards reconciliation over the years. If we'd just like to put your hands together for her too, please. I've lost my notes, so now I've got to wing it. Also, would love everyone to put their hands together. This walk is also about another patron, and you all know her by Auntie Betty. We've worked with her, we've loved her, and we've missed her. And we're here today to really pay our respect to such a wonderful woman who's done so much in the community here on the Sunshine Coast and afar. I'd like to welcome her family here today. And my understanding is I think just about everyone's here, so welcome. And, it's wonderful to have the family here today with us. And I need my notes. Lastly, I'd like to welcome all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community elders here today. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for making this such a special event. I'd like to welcome and thank Brent and Lyndon and the Gubbi Gubbi traditional custodians in which this land we meet. I'd like to thank you for coming here. And without further ado, I'd also like to hand it over to Mr. Brent Miller. Brent.
All right, thank you very much. Well, good day, everybody. What we all know is Wanya. So Wanya Ninyamani, or Wanya Nalam. Wanya is a good way of saying hello because, well, when you meet someone for the first time, it's always good to say hello, but it's good to say Wanya, or Wanya Nalam, or Wanya Ninyamani, meaning like, who are you? Where are you from? Reason why we say this, have that conversation, have that yarn with each other. Get to know one another, get to know each other's family, because I don't know about you, but when we have a talk like that, 9 times out of 10, we either related to you, or we know your mob, we know your country you're from. So it's always good to have that yarn with each other. And in the old days, that was the same way too. So when you're walking through country to country, have that yarn. Get to know one another around these areas. But as we all know, this beautiful country, that language that was spoken known as that Gubbi Gubbi or Kabi Kabi, which just means we are that people who use that word Gubbi or Kabi just to say the word no. Say it twice, it means the language that was spoken here. But I always tell people, you live here and you walk this land, we all still speak that language. And it's actually in the names of the towns. To know the names of the towns and the places around this area is to know your country. It's to know your connection between plants and animals. And how them plants and animals are connected to Gung, that water, the Jaya country, but also to ourselves. When you start seeing them, you actually start seeing our seasons. Where we know as 20, well, I reckon we got close up to 20. So more than 4, about 20 around here. But our environment will always tell us about it. Knowing something as simple as where we are now, kawana or kawana, talking about the wildflowers that grew in these areas, or the wallam flowers. They were very predominant in these areas. And all these days, because of oil construction and everything else, they're starting to disappear. But I was reading up some stories about the wildflowers in the early days, so after like World War II. And so whenever them fellas used to muck up, what they'd do is they'd go into these areas of kawana, to the wildflowers, and they'd pick a big bunch, and then they'd go home and then give them to their missus all the time. So this was actually a good place for them fellas who got in trouble. Just come out here and go and pick them flowers and take them back home. But when you're around this country here, you know, it's just that beautiful country, and we start to see those relationships around here. Those indicators are very important to the mob around here, and this is why, as traditional custodians, not only my family, but other custodians as well, we like to share these stories. We like to sing the songs. We like to do the dances. Because if we do this and keep these Dreamtime stories alive, well, it keeps our country alive. So this is why, as custodians, we actually offer it to everybody. Because if you live here and you walk this land, you are custodians as well. We'll teach you these stories, we'll teach you these songs as well, and do these dances, or we'll teach you these dances too. So now future generations, not only traditional custodians, but all people as custodians, can keep this beautiful country still alive and still living. But I always pay my respects to my mob too, my family, Malula area, around this country too, Merredin Plains, but also a place where I was born, the place of the red flowering paperbark tree, or Numba, or Nambour today. Grandmother's country and Nani's countries too, talking about the hairpinned honeysuckle tree, or Badram as we know today. Also grandfather's country, the red-bellied black snake place. Such a cool place. Mulu, or Mululuba as we know today. I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me up here to have a yarn with you, to teach you a little bit about this country as well. But as always, I like to play this instrument that's right in front of me here, commonly known throughout the world as that didgeridoo. But the good thing about this didgeridoo is, traditionally was not played here. So I always pay my respects to the custodians of this instrument. Like here with their families around here, teaching the stories about our plants and animals. Well, the mob, the custodians of this instrument, did the same thing. If it wasn't for them since the beginning, teaching us law, teaching us song about the didgeridoo, teaching us how to play, where it was made. If it wasn't for them, for countless generations, teaching all us about this, we'd only know this is a hollow bit of log. Only in the last couple of 100 years it made its way down this way here. So before that, we used to just sing and dance, and the women used to have possum skin over their legs, and they used to beat it as drums as well. So got to say thank you to those custodians as well. But it's all to do with vibrational lips blown gently and softly, and like I always say, one key thing when playing, breathe. You got to breathe when you play. You don't breathe, you don't play too good. Well, it's going to be very short anyway. But I'd like to finish off by playing this one for you now. Thank you. So, Ganagon Yen, thank you very much.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for such a beautiful welcome, Brent, the Gubby Gubby Dance Troupe, for putting that on for us today. I too would just like to my acknowledgement for the traditional owners in which this land we meet on today. I'd like to pay my respect to the traditional owners of the land, past, present and emerging elders. I'd like to welcome Naomi Dwyer to come out, and Naomi's going to give you a little bit of an explanation around the purpose of the yarning circle, and look at the official garden opening and the overview of the project.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Brent, for that wonderful welcome to country. It is my very great pleasure and pride, actually, to see so many of you here today to celebrate the opening of our Reconciliation Garden, and also to walk in partnership in memory of a very prominent elder, much loved Auntie Betty. And it's so wonderful to see Auntie Betty's family here this morning with us. Before we begin, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gubby Gubby people, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I would like to acknowledge Auntie Judy, who's with us today, and other elders from our community. I would like to acknowledge some special friends that we have here today. Our board chair, Dr. Lorraine Ferguson, and Jason, thank you for acknowledging the leadership of our health service in our commitment to the reconciliation journey. I would also like to share with you the very deep commitment of the Sunshine Coast Hospital and Health Services Board under the leadership of Dr. Ferguson in that journey. I'd like to acknowledge Senator Claire Moore. Great to have you here today. And very serendipitously, and how happy are we to have Peter Jackson, who is co-chair of Reconciliation Queensland, driving through and having the opportunity to come and say a few words today. Wonderful to see so many members of our community, members of my own team, all of the children from Mountain Creek and Unity College. As we know, the importance of truth-telling and understanding the history of our nation and the importance of that for future generations. And I was just thrilled to meet Imogen from Mountain Creek, who in fact is doing a school assignment on this very issue, and so is actually videoing parts of today's opening and event. I'd also like to acknowledge Jack and David King, and we've already heard a little bit about the talking sticks, but they've created the masterful sculpture in bringing those talking sticks to life. Friend of our hospital and health service, Russell, who is CEO of Suncare. So I think you can see from that long list, and I truly hope I haven't forgotten anybody, but today is an opportunity to come together in partnership to talk about the importance of reconciliation, and I think to celebrate how we're translating that in a very physical aspect here within our health service. You may be aware that this year's national theme for reconciliation is grounded in truth, walk together with courage. And when I think about that theme, it occurs to me that no matter what relationship that we have, the strong and enduring, the positive relationships that we have, I've always found it on a basis of trust, on truth. And I think that is a very important element of our relationship with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community here on the Sunshine Coast in Gympie. Last year I had the honour of launching our Reconciliation Action Plan as a hospital and health service and lending my leadership and voice to the importance of reconciliation. Doesn't seem that long ago actually, and then at that particular time we thought the garden might be open, and wouldn't it be great to actually launch our Reconciliation Action Plan contiguous with the opening of the garden, but I actually think it turned out for the best because it gives us a second opportunity to come together in the spirit of reconciliation on such an important day. Being here today to officially open our reconciliation garden is a very special milestone. As Jason said, the original idea was that it would be a ceremonial smoking area, but it was actually through our conversations and dialogue with community that vision was transformed into the reconciliation garden that you see here today. I've mentioned Jack and David, but this garden has really come to life through collaboration with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community and through some very special members who've contributed artwork. For example, John Murray, who designed the planning of the garden over there, and many others, including Judy Gallagher from our team, who managed all the logistics, and there she is down there, who very proudly managed all of the logistics in bringing it to fruition. The health service is committed to patient-centred care and culturally safe and culturally competent care. And when I walked down here with Sharon a few weeks ago now to have a look at the garden when the sticks were established, we talked about what an important sense of place this garden is for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients, consumers and their families, as being a really spiritual and safe place that actually acknowledges the importance of our relationship with community in this hospital and health service. And I was really proud, actually, Sharon, that day that we came down here and had a conversation about the beauty of this garden, but also what it means to our community. And I know that Auntie Betty would have loved it as well. So it now gives me great pleasure to officially open this reconciliation garden. Thank you all very much for being here today for such an important milestone event in the life of our hospital and health service. I hope that you will join us a little bit later on the commemorative walk to acknowledge and pay tribute to Auntie Betty and to join with me in walking with her family. Just one little story just before I finish. I remember I think one of the very first appointments I made when I was Chief Executive here in terms of who are the important people that I needed to meet as a new Chief Executive on the Sunshine Coast Hospital and Health Service. And one of the very first appointments, actually probably was my first external appointment that I made, was to go and visit John Spink over at North Coast Aboriginal and Health Corp. And that was followed very soon after by a collaborative meeting looking at how we would close the gap in health inequality. And Auntie Betty was there, this just beautiful, committed, strong Aboriginal elder, and she just really imprinted on me from that day. And so I'm very proud to be here today to walk in memory of Auntie Betty as well. So please enjoy your day. It gives me much pride to now introduce to you Peter Jackson, who, as I said, very serendipitously was driving by and would like to have the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you. I'll talk about driving by shortly. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians in the land on which we're meeting here today. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful day. A real blessing. And I'd also like to acknowledge elders, past, present and future. And there are some wonderful elders up here. Auntie Betty, who certainly was one of those. But there are many others. Cubby people are delightful people. As a matter of fact, my son, who is now 46 this year, we adopted him when he was 13 days old, and his grandmother is a cubby woman. And I couldn't be more proud about that man. So, I'd also like to acknowledge young upcoming elders in our community. Highly educated young men and women are coming through. It's a snowball. It's a huge snowball. And I've been working in this sort of field with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education for quite some years. I've travelled extensively working on projects for Tickner, the Minister Tickner, Minister Crean and others all around Australia. And I've seen the work that particularly Aboriginal women, the work that they've done. They've broken through all sorts of ceilings to get these kids into universities and what have you. I was at the Queensland Resource Council's awards, times fly, the night before last, and the first award was presented by to a young woman who had double degrees in engineering. Not an easy task, and she was studying to do her master's degree as well, and she won a major award in the mining industry, the resource industry, and that's acknowledged. And there were many others who were up there as well, receiving major awards, some in the trades area, some in other parts of the mining industry area, and you know, they're breaking through. They're breaking through all over the place. There are dentists, doctors. It just goes on. It's amazing stuff, and I'm thrilled about that. So, having said all that, I think I'd just like to refer to Auntie Betty, if I may. I know her family is here. Auntie Betty was on our board for some years, as Maggie is right now. Auntie Betty was a very interesting character. Those who knew Auntie Betty, very strong woman, very strong woman. I went up to visit her when she was in hospital in Brisbane, in the Chermside Hospital, and I said, Auntie Betty, what would you like me to bring? And she said, bring me a Coke, please. And I said, but Auntie Betty, you're in hospital with a heart condition. How can you have a Coke? She said, just bring me a Coke. When I got there with that Coke, we spoke a little bit. I didn't give it to her straight away. I said, I'm not giving it to you until I speak to the staff here and make sure it's okay. But what she did say to me was that her doctor had told her that her heart condition was such that it brought on her grumpy periods at times when she was grumpy with me, and she wanted to apologise. So, anyway, I'll always remember that, you know. It's such a wonderful, wonderful way of expressing herself under those circumstances, you know. And it's true reconciliation, you know, it really is. It's sharing something with others at that level, you know. And she didn't have to apologise to me, but she did. And so I will always remember Auntie Betty, and it's a great tribute that the hospital is establishing this commemorative walk, you know, in the name of Auntie Betty, a true First Nations person who believed in reconciliation. And that's great, you know, because many of us here now, whether we're First Nations people or whether we're others, also believe in reconciliation. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Now, congratulations on the hospital in developing your RAP. You know, that's a significant thing. The RAP is actually part of your strategic plan. It's an ongoing thing, and you've got to address it. Reconciliation action plan is a plan that works and needs to permeate out across your hospital and the community. I always say to people now, you know, being that you're all here, it's amazing that you're all public servants. Does anybody feel that they're not a public servant? A public servant in the sense of working towards reconciliation to the benefit of the public of Australia. So think upon it that way. You are a public servant, okay? You're not working for the government necessarily, but you are a public servant. And that's absolutely wonderful. I rabbit on a little bit. Maggie will give me a kick shortly. But look, I'd like to congratulate you on your garden. I had the opportunity through a friend who had just retired in Brisbane as head of the neonatal ward in Brisbane. And he was working up here in this building here, right on the end. I guess it's still there, is it? Right on the end here. And I looked out upon here, not knowing that this garden would be developed here, and it's just wonderful. I walked the full length of the hospital right up the other end. I had a good look around, a guided tour. I ate in the little restaurant out here because I was hungry, and my daughter was one of the early patients admitted, she's down the back here, admitted into the private section up there, which is a long way. I mean, you'll have to separate that gap somehow. Yeah, so look, and so it's a great facility here. And remember, you are on First Nations people country, and you have to respect that and acknowledge it. But it is a wonderful country, and I think we all acknowledge that as well. Grounded in truth, there's a lot of stuff that has to be said and is being said around the place right now. The truth is important to reconciliation, extremely important. I went through the school system here in Brisbane, excuse me, I won't tell you when. It was in the 50s, basically. We were told a lot of lies. And those lies are being turned upside down now. And we're talking about the truth now. And that's wonderful. And if you can sit down with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, particularly the elders, and talk to them about their lives and what the truth really is, to their extended families. So, and I think that's, I can see a few heads nodding. Yeah, okay. And we acknowledge First Nations people as being Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people. So have a wonderful day today. The walk is a significant walk. When you're walking, think about the country that you're walking on. Think about the people. Think about the fact that, you know, in reconciliation, that we need to embrace all the customs and all those things that go with our First Nations people. And as a continent, as an Australian, when you go overseas, which I'll be doing shortly, you need to acknowledge that this is a beautiful country. And when I fly back in from, say, Singapore, and I look down over Arnhem Land for the first time as I cross this continent, I know what's down there. I know the people who own that land down there. And it's a great continent. So, and I'd also like to, and I can't see Senator Claire Moore. Are you there? I can't see you there. Well, oh, thanks. You're sitting beside my daughter, by the way. I'd like to acknowledge all the work that Senator Claire Moore has done towards reconciliation. She has been out there. She's attended many of our meetings in Brisbane. She's made herself available. She's worked hard with the Sunshine Coast Reconciliation Group, which is a wonderful group. I always say it with pride to others around the country where we go, and we talk about how good this particular group is up here. But I want to acknowledge Senator Claire Moore, all the work you've done. I know you're retiring from politics. That's wonderful. And I know the government has gotten back in. That's fine, because they've appointed an Aboriginal person as the First Minister. He's just been sworn in about an hour ago as the First Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs. So that's real progress. So that's wonderful. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, just join me again in thanking Peter Jackson for such a wonderful, I suppose, overview of, you know, what Auntie Betty has done and how she supported the Reconciliation Queensland as well. And yeah, thank you.
I just need to correct one statement which I indicated earlier when I started. I wasn't just passing through. I guess I was. I was turning around and going back. I drove up from Sanford Valley this morning to pick up my daughter, who's got medical appointments down in Brisbane. So I'm squeezing that in before I go and get my suit on and go off to the Queensland Government Reconciliation Awards this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome up here Senator Claire Moore.
Good morning, everyone, and of course I share in the acknowledgement of the traditional owners, and I pay my respects to elders of all cultures, because I think that is the core message of reconciliation, that we share, we work together, and we build our community. Thank you always for that fantastic welcome. I mean, you hear a lot of welcomes, you know, when you go to lots of functions, but I don't think you could hear a better one than that one this morning. So thank you again. It makes us, brings us to focus on why we're here. I'm not going to speak for long, you'll be pleased to know. In terms of, it's a congratulations to all the people who have made this event happen. It is important. One of the core messages that Betty had was that reconciliation belonged to community. People have plans, there's legislation, there are parliaments, but the core thing is that community acknowledge, engage and celebrate reconciliation. And that's what this beautiful place, and it truly is extraordinarily beautiful. So congratulations to the Health Board and the various people who work to make this happen. This is an extraordinarily beautiful place and will offer so much support and comfort to people into the future, and the artwork is wonderful. There's a woman in the audience today who's wearing last year's NAIDOC theme T-shirt, which I think is the most important message that I have ever seen in the work in this space. And the theme of last year's NAIDOC was, because of her, we can. Now, does that sum up Auntie Betty's work in one sentence? Because of her, we're gathering together. Because of her, her family are with us today and will have that memory into the future. And because of her, the extraordinary work of the Sunshine Coast Reconciliation Group, and Maggie, you and your whole team, and I know you're going to talk about the history of the group, so I won't steal your thunder. They have never stopped working. And you might remember years ago when we had the work leading up around the Reconciliation Action Plan, the original one, there were over 60 reconciliation groups across Queensland who are working in this space. The one that has continued all the way through that I'm aware of is this one at the Sunshine Coast. So I pay my respects, I celebrate and I thank you for the work that you've done and for the work that you'll continue to do. Have a good work, have a good walk. Thank you to the children in particular for coming. You've been extraordinarily patient. I congratulate the teachers for that, so well done teachers. Enjoy the walk. The 2019 walk will be the one that comes before the 2020, the 2021 and into the future, and somewhere down the track we'll have that statement of the heart put in place in this nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Claire Moore. Well, I'd like to welcome a very special person onto the stage now, and as you've probably heard, this lady here is a bit of a driver behind the Sunshine Coast Reconciliation Group. I think been there pretty much from the start, and was also a very special woman in Auntie Betty's heart. I'd like to welcome Maggie Ross to the stage.
Thanks, Jason. Well, I've written what I want to say, so I'll be quick. They gave me 5 minutes, it's going to take me 10. So try and shut me down if you're game. Hi, everyone. I'm Assistant Secretary and Treasurer of the Sunshine Coast Reconciliation Group Incorporated, SCHHS is what I'll call it. It's an honour to be a part of this memorial event to Auntie Betty McMahon, and it is also an honour to have here today a foundation member, the person who started the Sunshine Coast Reconciliation Group, Dawn Wilson. And Dawn, Claire Devlin and Beryl Procopus, I've been trained, were three remarkable ladies who established the group in 1997. And appropriately, it is probably the longest continuously running reconciliation group in Australia. Thank you, Dawn, for your decades of dedication to reconciliation. I'm always acutely aware that I am merely following in your footsteps and footsteps of people like Jenny beside you and many others. And I try to share that awareness with new members whenever I can, because sometimes we think we're inventing the wheel that's already been invented, and I hate that. So I'm always aware that we're only building on what you started and what you kept going. Thank you, Dawn. Auntie Betty McMahon was active in the group for much of that time too, and she became its patron with her friend, Senator Claire Moore, I think around 2014, could be wrong, and Auntie Betty was extremely well respected by all and loved by many. She became my mentor in my First Nations journey, and we formed a strong affection for each other over time, and we butted heads a lot. But we, at the end, there was such a strong affection. I miss her so very much. I really do. And I miss her advice Yes, if I was going wrong, she would tell me, and I thank her for that. She always worked tirelessly for her family and the community. 2015 saw SCRGI hold its first annual walk, and Auntie Betty and Neil Whiteman over here took the opportunity to expand SCRGI's reach. And she continued doing that from her hospital bed up there. She was looking out over here in 2018, and she made sure everything went to plan for the walk from there too. Auntie Merle and I up the back here visited her at least 2 or 3 times a week while she was here, and she never let me off the hook for anything. And love her for that. During that time, she said she wanted the walk to be her legacy to the group, and so with her family's approval, and the walk has been renamed in her honour. And it will be held annually in Reconciliation Week. So it's now called the Auntie Betty Memorial Reconciliation Walk, previously called the Reconciliation Walk. Auntie Betty believed in the reconciliation movement and also served on the RQI, which is Reconciliation Queensland, Management Committee. National Reconciliation Week runs annually from May 27th to June the 3rd, and the 2019 theme is Grounded in Truth, Walk Together in Courage, as others have said. First Nations people were granted the vote in 1962, but not until May 27th, 1967, did the referendum succeed, which finally recognised First Nations people in the census. And a census assists in determining how government resources should be allocated, I think. Until then, it seems since 1788, they'd been seen as having no place in the land they'd inhabited for 70,000 years or more. June the 3rd, 1992, commemorates the High Court's historic decision, the Mabo decision, which overturned what Captain Cook wrongly said when he claimed the east coast of this continent for Britain. He said that this continent was terra nullius, and land that belonged to nobody, and that allowed settlers to take away the land from the First Nations people. However, the sovereignty of this great southern land has never been ceded by the dependents of the 600 plus nations with nearly 300 language groups that existed at the time, and who had resided here for millennia. And the battles over native title continue today. Unlike Auntie Betty, not all First Nations people are enthusiastic about reconciliation, probably because of the lies and distrust that we deserve. And many non-First Nations Australians say about reconciliation, what happened isn't my fault, tell them to get over it. Cop that a lot. But is it logical to rightly say about Anzac Day, lest we forget, and then say about the wars fought on this land after 1788 and the genocide which followed, get over it? Remembering Anzac Day makes us appreciate what we have now, and so should remembering the frontier wars. And revealing the truth of the genocidal outcomes helps those of us who are not First Nations people to better understand issues as a result of that, which continue to the present day. The 2019 Reconciliation Week theme, Grounded in Truth, Walk Together with Courage, gives all of us the opportunity to be better informed about the past. Since 2015, SCRGI has held and supported truth-telling and shared history seminars. We've done about 20 of them now. A lot of hard work. And Meredith Walker is the driving force behind those. She's the brains, I'm just the dog's body. And we distribute brochures at every event we go to with truth-telling included in them. I listen to reminiscing between Auntie Betty and Auntie Merle Amos, who's sitting over there. Yes, three stooges we were, Auntie Merle, weren't we? I used to say I'd like taking them both out because they could play together and I could sit and wait for them. So I listened to them reminisce about their childhoods and the treatment of their mothers by mainstream community. In our democracy, improvements in society happen only because people campaign for them. Election of governments are won or lost on effective campaigns. The hope is to convince enough voters of a point of view. It is shameful that so many people unintelligently or carelessly cast a vote, or they don't vote at all. That really makes me angry. We will eventually have to vote on whether Australia's constitution should be changed, because it still refers to this continent as terra nullius, which as I said, means belonging to no one, and that's just not true. It sounds like an easy task. It's not. Just ask the senator about convincing people about your point of view. It's hard work, and you don't always succeed. And correcting the Constitution is just one component of the Statement of the Heart, delivered as a result of the 300 First Nations delegates convention at Uluru in May 2017. SCHHS supports the Statement from the Heart, and we're attempting to fulfil the request of its working group by truth-telling. That is, Australia's colonial history is characterised by First Nations people being subjected to devastating land dispossession, forced removal from their families' country of millennia, and country is spiritual, physical, social and cultural for those First Nations people connected to it, and to violence, introduction of alcohol and disease, forced change of diet, stolen children and family separation, forced abandonment of culture and language, and to racism. Understandably, all of this has led to dysfunction in so many of today's lives, and today the impacts remain for many First Nations families. For me, and probably most people, at this very point in time, First Nations child suicides are the cause of much distress. We don't seem to have an answer. Auntie Betty took her duty as an elder very seriously and regularly sat in the Murray courts, introduced by her friend Magistrate Di Fingleton, who's an apology today because she's overseas. They had a very close relationship. To help First Nations, the Murray courts help First Nations people accused of crimes address the factors in their lives that led them there, and to assist the magistrate with an appropriate sentence if found guilty of a crime. Auntie Betty was very good at that. Whilst we all have choices about our attitudes and behaviours, some of us understand that disruptions and trauma, or even intergenerational trauma, impacts on us making correct and healthy choices. Auntie Betty was an advocate for organisations that support First Nations families, and whenever possible, so does SCHHS. The second part of the 2019 theme, Walk Together with Courage, encourages non-First Nations Australians to have courage and face the injustices of the past, and to walk with the First Nations people of this continent. This excerpt from Prime Minister Keating's 1992 Redfern address really resounds with me. Down the years, there's been no shortage of guilt, but has not produced the responses we need. Guilt is not a very constructive emotion. I think what we need to do is open our hearts a bit, all of us. And that's what reconciliation is to me, opening our hearts to each other, treating each other with respect. And that is what SCHHS attempts to do when carrying out our objective, which is to work on projects and to share information that bring a better understanding and acceptance of reconciliation. That had to happen, didn't it? Sorry, I'll be with you in a sec. Okay, so, yep. Nearly there, folks. Sorry. Auntie Betty loved her family deeply. They know that. I know it very well. And also cared about all young people. She enjoyed being part of the Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience, or AIM, in schools. She would be so happy to see all of you young people here today celebrating your heritage. You've been so well behaved, thank you. Our sponsors, some of whom have reconciliation action plans, are helping to close the gap in areas like health, education and employment. Please take this opportunity to ask them about job opportunities they have to offer when you finish school. SCHHS awards First Nations students an annual bursary in honour of one of its members, Keith Wisson, who devoted much of his spare time to tutoring First Nations students. He was like me. He's priceless. He was priceless. No one can afford to pay us, so we're volunteers. And we also give graduation medals to Year 12 students, and we have donated funds to AIM. There's so much else I'd love to tell you about, but time doesn't allow for that today. SCRGI sincerely thanks all of our sponsors, whose marquees you'll see around here, for your ongoing support, which allows us to punch above our weight in the reconciliation movement. We cannot do what we are doing without it, and all that we do supports what the Statement from the Heart calls for. Thank you to Sunshine Coast University Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Health Team, especially Assistant Project Officer Sunny Jamison, and to Sharon, and all for all of your work in making today happen. It has taken a lot of work, hasn't it, Sunny, wherever you are. And to Naomi Dwyer for supporting the idea of having the inaugural Auntie Betty Memorial Reconciliation Walk coincide with the opening of the SCHHS Reconciliation Garden. And that was another of Auntie Betty's goals. And thanks to all of you for listening to me. The future's in your hands, young people. You can forget 70,000 years of heritage, or you can embrace it and positively and proudly share it with those of us who are non-First Nations Australians. And I've become rather passionate about your heritage. It is, after all, the soul of this great southern land of ours.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Well, this leads to a very special ceremony. I'd like to welcome one of the elders of the community up here, Gordon Browning, who's going to do a smoking ceremony for us. And also would love to welcome the Gubby Gubby Dance Troupe. Everybody, listen, Browning.
Jingiri, Jingiri Walla Walla. My mob's from Bunjalung, Yugambeh people. I've just been asked to come along today and do a smoking ceremony for you. I'd just also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting on today. This is a special time. I'd like to remember Auntie Betty. But I'll hand it over to Lyndon, and then he can do...
Yo, Eva. Yo, Wanya. Wanyangalam. Wanyangalam Janango. Hello and welcome with the Gubby Gubby Dance Troupe. Very privileged to be here today, represent the family and to be part of the ceremony there, paying our respects to one of the elders of our landscape here, of this local area. I was happy to say that I knew Arnie, and yeah, really good role model there. Out at all the events, he's always there. You know, we're always at them events too, and when you see some of them elders sitting there, you know, it makes you feel nice and strong and powerful, and you know, even more proud. We're proud as, but you know, when you see those elders there, it definitely makes you, you know, go that extra bit further. But that's what we do it for. We do it for our families that were past, that lived here, that looked after this land, those trees and plants. That's the legacy they left for us. And we got to know them all just like they do, so we can look after them so the next generation can also benefit from our beautiful landscapes. Beautiful landscapes get beautiful personality in people. So the Gubby Gubby Dance Troupe, and we'll do a little bit of dancing there as Gordon's doing the smoking ceremony as well. But as I said, privileged to be here today, represent the family and paying our respects to some of our elders. Wanya. Go away. All right, this first little crobbery we'd like to share with everyone here today. This song is very well known in the southeast area. A lot of groups, dance troops use this song. They use it for a welcoming song. We're going to use it, the same gesture, to welcome all the good people, welcome all the good spirits on behalf of our families there. So this song is called Gari Ninanami Jojomo Birono Gayan Man Murangai Jagon Gungan Yongo. That's the long version. You just say Gari. Are they doing Gary then, brothers? They're doing Gary? Yeah, Gary. Yo, way. So let's do Gary for you. Yo. Go away. Right, thank you very much.